Why is it that I can't go back to yesteryear? When I reach out my hand, why can't I just grab a younger version of myself and pull him out and begin to talk to him? I suppose it's because time is such a solid thing. But as I looked into it, I realized that time wasn't as solid as it first appears, and that when it comes to anything time, things become a lot more trickier than you could ever imagine. So, I am a big fan of time travel, especially in fiction. A lot of people think it's a cliche. Personally, I am not tired of it. And one thing I've come to realize in fiction, and especially in my own fiction when I write my own time travel stories, is that there is a lot of times when just these big problems arrive because of time travel. Not unsolvable problems, but ones that just just seem like totally incomprehensible. So I thought I'd go ahead and talk about my favorite. You can call these bootstrap paradoxes, grandfather paradoxes, whatever you want. I just call them fun ideas. The first one is kind of the most depressing. So, if you were to go back in time and say, kill your grandfather, and you go forward into the future and realize that just everything's changed, people's dies, it's basically an apocalypse now. The question that I have is, what does that mean for the other universe that you just left? Does that mean that all those people in that universe, including your grandfather, are now dead? I know that this is getting complicated, but basically I'm saying the people in this new universe are completely different from that one. I mean, if you just kill one person, think about how that changes the gene pool. You know, that just has really some very unexpected consequences. So my thing that I wonder is, does that mean that this is just an entirely different universe? Yes, I realize this is very complicated what I'm discussing, but let me just put it in layman terms. Basically, I'm saying whenever you time travel, are you killing an entire universe? I think that makes things a lot simpler, right? The second thing I wanted to discuss was an entirely different theory on time travel. It's the kind of time travel you see in The Prisoner of Azkaban, for instance. When you go back in time, but no matter what you do, you cannot change the future. The future is fixed. So any changes you make, they had already occurred. And weirdly enough, this is the theory most scientists believe, which is actually kind of weird because there's a lot of creepy inclinations to this. Basically, what this theory is saying is that there is some kind of power, this almighty power, this thinking universe, this mind that is making sure you do not make any changes to the past. I mean, what other explanation could there be? If you truly make up your mind to go back in time and kill yourself, for instance, or kill your grandfather or whatever, why couldn't you just do it, just like you could in this universe if you really made up your mind to do it? There must be something watching over this world, which is kind of a good thing when you stop and think about it, but I can't help but find it kind of scary, at least when it comes to time travel. Here's one that you've probably already heard about, or at least maybe have, and it's the Bootstrap Paradox. And the Bootstrap Paradox states that, say for instance, you were to come up with the idea of how to make a light bulb, and you go back in time and you drop off the instructions to the past version of yourself. And this version of yourself reads the instructions and figures out how to create a light bulb. So the question is, who really came up with the instructions on how to make a light bulb? Because the instructions that you are getting basically come from nowhere, because that's your past self. Again, this is kind of confusing, but it's the same thing that's posed in Back to the Future when Marty McFly hears that Chuck Berry song, and he goes back in time to the past and writes it down, and then Chuck Berry hears it. Who really came up with the idea? Again, another creepy thing, and I'm starting to think of that magical time brain entity, almost, whenever I consider this. But whatever this time brain entity is, I want to know, because this thing sounds really interesting if it's making all these very strange decisions about time. This fourth one is one speculated by Stephen Hawking. And I don't want to disagree with Stephen Hawking, but hear me out, Hawking, if you're listening to this. Stephen Hawking came up with a different idea from the grandfather paradox. He imagined a mad scientist who created a hole in time and was able to look back at the past version of themselves. They pulled out a gun and shot a bullet through this gateway, and it hit the past version. What happens to that person? Since there's no cause and effect, Hawking's theory was that time travel just couldn't be possible. My theory is that you would shoot the past version of yourself, and then history would change entirely, and this version would disappear, basically. It would never exist. The whole thing would just break apart. And the only memory would be maybe the past version of himself seeing you shoot. That would be it. But I know this is very complicated, and of course I'm not sure if it's true. Probably it's not. You're probably right, Hawking. I'm sorry to question you. So, since I'm running out of time, that is all the time travel I want to discuss. Do you guys have any explanations for some of the things that are going on? Let me know in the comments. I really enjoyed this episode. I really love time travel, and I hope to do some more of it in the future. I want to be able to travel in time. I have not been successful yet. I've had some past experiments. I'll leave them in the description. But anyways, until next time, remember to think big, think different.